Howdy, happy Saturday. Hope everybody's doing well. This is Don Ross here in Prince Edward Island, Canada. And we had a big hurricane this week, you may have heard. It was a crazy time. Actually, when the hurricane hit, I wasn't far. I was just in the next province sort of south of us, Nova Scotia. And I was there because I do a lot of film scoring these days. And I was attending the Atlantic International Film Festival, or the Fin Festival as it's called now. I had a film that actually screened there. That was cool. And I stuck around for the week because I went to a whole lot of conferences at the festival, and also the same film was screening last Sunday in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, so just about an hour and 15 minutes west of Halifax. So I had a place to stay, actually right next door to where I used to live in a town called Seabright, and not far from Halifax. My daughter surprised me. She had a film that was opening the following week in Halifax, not part of the festival, but another film that she was involved with. So she was down for the weekend, and she flew in just before the hurricane hit and stayed with me where I was staying, and we both got woken up at 1 a.m. with the house shaking. It was crazy. And even though it didn't get hit there quite as bad as it did around here, it was still bananas. That was the first serious hurricane I've really experienced up close. I experienced Hurricane Bob in New Jersey back around 1991, I think. And that was scary. I was camping. But unfortunately, my poor wife, Brooke, had to batten down the hatches here at the house on PEI and weather the storm here with just the dogs. And she said it was pretty horrifying. And judging by the damage in the neighborhood, yeah, it was crazy. Fortunately, our property got off pretty easy. Our house is fine. We had a few down trees and a few down branches, small tree, well, mostly one big tree in the back, but it sort of fell into the forest, and then a few branches here and there. So we fared okay. Some other people, holy smokes, really got hit hard. A lot of big trees coming down on houses, yards pulled up with tree roots, all kinds of stuff. People's cars having trees land on them. Anyway, we get the occasional big storm here, but nothing like this. This is the biggest storm that's ever hit this part of Canada. And global warming, I think it's real. It looks like it is. Okay, so welcome to the Ask Me Anything. This is part of what I do every single week with my group on the Don Ross Guitar Academy. We have a Facebook group, and it's attached to my website. So you can see the website address here on the right side of the screen, donrossguitaracademy.com. So what there's a whole bunch of pre-recorded lessons, beginner and intermediate lessons so far. We're adding more content all the time. And when you join, you also get access to the Facebook group. And that's where I tell you about these live streams that happen every week. Normally, these are unlisted streams that only the membership gets to see. But every once in a while, I make one public just because it's fun. And also, it helps promote the website and lets you know about what's going on. So if you'd like to join, that's where we are. If you'd like to just chip in a few bucks to help the cause of a musician who's struggling through the end of COVID and the beginning of hurricanes and all that kind of stuff, happy to receive it there at the PayPal address. So I'm just going to take a look at some of your comments here. I see some of our regulars from the DRGA are here. Marathon from Hungary, and Alexander from Siberia, and Kerstin from Germany is here. And Renee Peterson from Denmark. Really nice to see you. And Nuret, another regular here. Hi, Cameron. And New, to answer your question, it's an easy one. I'm doing well. I have a bad knee, which has, I think it's a sign of advancing age more than anything else. I think I've inherited a little bit of my mom's arthritis. So that's becoming a reality. So that's a bit of a drag. As long as it stays out of my hands, I'm happy. And Marathon, you say, I was wondering the other day when someone asked me, what music do you like? And I tried to ignore music genres. I listened to all kinds of music, you said. And and you said that you love creativity and originality. What's your approach? I would double that. I would say that I like almost every kind of music that you could imagine. There are very few styles of music I don't like. I'm not that crazy about like commercial country music. It's not really my bag, you know. I think it's just that's a cultural problem. I think I grew up in French Canada, and country music is much more of a local thing, you know, to sort of the middle of America. So I didn't really, it doesn't really do much for me. That said, there's still some cool crossover music that some country artists do that I think works really well. And then otherwise, I mean, I grew up listening to all kinds of modern music, everything from jazz to rock and roll to R&B and electronic music. And then I really got into you know, punk and new wave music when I was a kid. And then I was always into orchestral music. My dad's a classical music buff and a classically trained singer, so gave me a sort of wide open set of ears for all kinds of different kinds of music. And then, you know, in recent years, I'm a solo fingerstyle guitar player. What does that mean? I don't know. Fingerstyle is it's a technique, right? A lot of people think of fingerstyle guitar like it's a genre, which it really isn't. I mean, you can play any kind of music if you play fingerstyle guitar. It's just you're treating the guitar like a piano or an orchestra or whatever. You can play multi-voice. You can play harmonically and melodically at the same time. The guitar is an amazing instrument that way, and that's one of the reasons I love playing it, and I've loved playing it since I was a kid. But it's a means to an end. It's a way of making music, right? So for me, it's not really about the guitar. It's about music. So as a result, I like all kinds of music, and I've always really tried hard to learn a lot of, you know, at least a little bit of a lot of different instruments, just so I can understand how music works better. So I taught myself a little bit of flute one time just to try to understand woodwinds better. My stepson took trumpet in school, so I figured out how to do the harmonics and the technique, the embouchure that you need for playing trumpet, so I'd understand brass instruments better. And my late wife was a harpist, so I had access to a harp, and I used to play it regularly. And I taught myself keyboard, I taught myself bass, and a bunch of other things. So as a result, you know, I have a really wide open mind about music in general. And Cameron, you're saying, glad to know we're safe. You're getting the end of a storm in Scotland. Oh, that's in Scotland. You're on the northwest coast of England. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm not sure what kind of storms you get there, if you get cyclones in that part of the world or not. You know, we get really bad, like I said, you know, since we're on the east coast of North America, we're subject to some storms here, even though we're quite far north compared to, say, Florida or the Carolinas, where they're getting hit right now. That part of the United States is used to getting hit every season pretty much by hurricanes. Here in Atlantic Canada, it's maybe every other year that we sort of get the end of a hurricane usually. And sometimes we just get smacked like we did this time. The last really serious storm that we had here was Hurricane Juan in 2003. That was a bad one. That really hit the city of Halifax badly. So, you know, okay, every 20 years you get a pretty big storm. You might have to really watch for falling branches and stuff. But otherwise, it's pretty nice living around here. Sam Hornby, hi. Age-old question: groove, chords, or melody first? Ben Suzanne says he doesn't write with his guitar in hand. Do you compose with in your head or on an instrument? Lots of very cool related questions there, Sam. Thanks. Well, for me, I think everything kind of comes in a different way, depending on the style of the piece of music or the role of the piece of music that I'm writing. With the guitar, very often I find groove comes as an idea, sometimes in my head, sometimes with the guitar in my hand. So, you know, for example, there's a well-known tune of mine called Dracula and Friends Part 1. And it started... Okay, so that particular song, I've told my smaller group that is here every week, I've told them the story before, so bear with me, guys. But there was just one day I had a concert, I remember it was in Montreal, and it was with Pierre Ben-Suzanne. You mentioned Pierre Ben-Suzanne. He and I did a double bill one time in Montreal. And I remember our sound tech was having problems with the front of house speakers. There was some issue. So while she figured that out, the monitor speakers were working fine, and I was getting a really nice mix on stage. So in order to sort of keep myself occupied, because I sort of had to be ready to do my sound check whenever she was ready, I just was up there and I was just sort of playing this kind of slow R&B groove, you know? And then I came up with the bass line. And I thought, oh, that's really, really cool. I love that. So fortunately, I had about a half hour to sort of work on that and some ideas to go around it. And I ended up employing this kind of question and answer approach between the melody line etc., that kind of thing. So the bass line, there's these little spaces in it, and I'm sort of fitting what sound like horn shots in the upper strings in between the bass line notes. So that's a way that I've written a lot of sort of groove-based tunes. And so I have a few kind of tricks that I use for groove-based material like that, like Michael, 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 or Lucy Watusi, or the Two Draculas, or a few other ones. But when Pierre says he doesn't write with his guitar in his hands, he probably does that as a discipline. Ultimately, okay, if he's thinking about the idea of the tune, that's great. Another way to write, like the Pat Metheny approach, is to write at the keyboard all the time, because for both Pierre and Pat, I'm sure their attitude is that when they try to write with the guitar in their hands, inevitably their hands will go to somewhere familiar, right? Like you end up sort of walking down the same path you've covered before, inevitably. But if you write on another instrument, or if you write in your head, basically, and you come to the instrument saying, oh, the tune goes like blah, 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 and you try to emulate that on the instrument, and some of the chord changes you're trying to get, you know, that you've got in your head, you're trying to find those as well. That can be a great way to write, because then you don't end up going to those familiar places. Same with writing on the keyboard. Sometimes if you have any keyboard skill at all, even if you're not a great piano player, sometimes you find these cool harmonies that you just wouldn't necessarily find if you had the guitar in your hand. And I find I play keyboard quite differently than I play the guitar, and I compose on the keyboard a different way. It's just a different approach. Different things come out. And so sometimes, like, there's a piece of mine called, it's in a very distant tuning, so I won't try to get there, but it's called My Previous Life. I recorded on an album in 2005, I think. And that's a tune I wrote when I was very young on the piano, and it's in G minor, right? So first of all, it's written on the keyboard. Second of all, it's in a not guitar-friendly key. So in order to, eventually I wanted to play it on the guitar, so I had to come up with a tuning that would make the piece a lot easier to achieve. And so I ended up with this, I think what I remember, I haven't played the tune in a long time, but I think I tuned like my top 5 strings to like a G minor tuning. So like maybe the top 5 strings are like G, D, G, B flat, D, I think, maybe, if I remember correctly. And I tuned the bottom string to E flat, because there's a change in it where it goes to the E flat major chord. And it just that much made the whole tune achievable on the instrument. If I'd tried to play it in standard tuning, nope, never would have worked. So, but, you know, it really brought out the possibilities of doing something that was not what I would normally do on the guitar. So yeah, Pat and Pierre use that method quite regularly as a discipline. I very often write away from the instrument as well. I write on the keyboard, or I just write in my head. Maybe 50% of the time, and the other 50% I write purposely with the guitar in my hand, and the ideas and the playing come at the same time. And sometimes those tunes get written really quickly, whereas the ones that come from somewhere else need a bit of arranging, you know what I mean? Oh good, we're getting some spam comments, hooray. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Goo925T. That's nice that you said that. Is that your middle name? Sam, so you said that exactly. He said he wanted to stay away from the obvious. Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. And as a result, I mean, when you listen to Pierre play, Pierre has an incredibly lyrical way of playing and a very free way of playing. That where it sounds like the music. He's finding all kinds of possibilities that you wouldn't even think of normally, and that's probably because he wrote at the keyboard or whatever he does. I've sat beside him a few times at festivals or when we've co-billed a show, and just sitting there like a few feet from him, listening and watching him play, you think, wow, like nobody else writes like that, nobody else plays like that. He's got a very, very distinctive voice, and not writing in a typical way probably means that he doesn't play in a typical way. One leads to another. You're asking here, how do you learn every scale on the guitar creatively and effectively, and how to put it into practice into a fantastic composition? New is our friend who's here every week, and he always asks very gigantic questions. Questions that would take far too long to answer really well. So I'll do what I can. The scales, the problem with the guitar in general is that in standard tuning, the guitar is, it's easy to understand up to a point. What my point is that the bottom four strings we tune in fourths, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, I'm not tuned to there anymore. 1 second. I changed my tuning. Okay, so in standard tuning, we got E, and then we go up 4 notes. E, F, G, A, and then another 4 notes. A, B, C, D, D, E, F, G. Okay, so those are what are called fourths. Basically 4 scale steps, 4 letter names, right? Between each of those strings. So that makes there's some predictability. Like you could do things like that works out nicely. You could play do, re, mi, fa on each string, basically, and end up at the next note. Or even do, re, mi, and then fa is the next note, right? Do, re, mi, fa, like that. Now, the problem on the guitar is that we don't tune consistently. We've got this G, and then this B note on the second string is only a major third away, not a fourth. It's do, re, mi, right? So that immediately adds a layer of complication. And then the top 2 strings again go back to the fourth. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So you can learn your scales, but then you'll always have to make this allowance for that weird tuning anomaly, right? So you see like the bottom octave of a scale, you can say play an A major scale like this. Not so bad. Now, wouldn't it be nice if you could just take that same fingering, start here at the octave and go... No, it doesn't work, right? Because of the tuning. So that means that you always have to be adapting for that major third there. I don't know how well you can see it. Okay, so over my right shoulder, so to your left here, you can barely see a strange instrument. You're just seeing the back of it. That's not a keyboard. That's an instrument called the Kelstone. It was invented by the late Jan Kelst, who was a Belgian musician and inventor. And he invented this instrument. If you've heard of the Chapman stick, this is not unlike a Chapman stick, but it's quite different at the same time. It's a tapping guitar. But the thing is, you can do things on it that are difficult to do on a Chapman stick, hard to explain. If you look at Kelstone, that's Kelstone, on YouTube, there's a few of his instructional videos up there, and you can see the various techniques you can use on it. It's very interesting. But I only bring it up because it's tuned consistently all the way across in fourths. And it's a 9-stringed instrument. So once you learn the scales, major scales, minor scales on that instrument, you can transpose your hand positions all across the instrument easily enough, because the shapes will always be the same. The way the scales look on the instruments will always be the same, not on the guitar. So what I usually tell people about the guitar, the best thing to do, there are 5 keys and this is pretty general knowledge, but there are 5 keys that are the most guitar friendly. Okay? And basically, they are so-called sharp keys, meaning they employ notes that are sharp in the key signature. Now, the only exception would be the key of C. C is just all naturals. So C is really simple on the guitar. Okay, you played a lot of chord notes, rather songs probably in C, using these chords, right? So the reason why the key of C is pretty guitar friendly is because we tune our strings in standard tuning. We tune them to natural notes. So no sharps or flats in the open tuning. E, A, D, G, B, E. So there's no B flats, there's no F sharps, nothing like that. Everything is just a natural sign after the letter name. And what that means is all of those notes can be played in the key of C really easily, because the key of C is all the notes without sharps or flats. C, D, E, F, G, A, B. That's a C scale. So as a result, the C is easy to play. It's a lot of open strings there. I did it in 2 octaves, and I started on C. I was able to play C, an open D string, E, F, an open G string, A, an open B string, C, D, an open E string. A lot of open strings, okay, so that makes it user-friendly. Makes it sound good, because open strings sound the best. They just do. And so the key, that's why the key of C and all its chords are simple. Then the next key above that uses 1 sharp is the key of G. It has an F sharp in it. So it starts on G. Also very guitar friendly, extremely guitar friendly actually. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp. That's the only tricky thing. Okay, it's got the F sharp. You have to finger there in that octave. You have to play it on the 4th fret, the 4th string. And then open G, and then A, B, C, D, E, and there's the F sharp again. So there's 2 octaves of a G scale, really simple. Okay, and then, so G is easy, and then the next one with 2 sharps is D, and as you know, D is a very guitar-friendly key. Now, you'll notice even by D, okay, you've got 2 sharps in the key signature. You'll notice that you have to start fingering more notes. You can't play as many strings open as you did before. And then in A, which is the 3 sharp key, another very guitar friendly key, but still you have to finger a lot of notes. And I'll just play the scale. A, B, C sharp. So I've had to finger those notes so far. D, E, F sharp, G sharp. Okay, so a lot of notes cannot be left open. You can't just play them as open strings. And E, ironically, even though you're tuning your 2 outside strings to E, E major has a lot of fingered notes as well. I doubled the B note, but there, that shows you that you can use a combination of open and fingered notes, but at the same time, you don't have as many open strings available to you. So the more sharps you add, the fewer open strings you have. But what I've done is I've illustrated the 5 easy keys, basically the 5 easiest keys. C, G, D, A, E. And if you rearrange those letters, it spells the word caged, C-A-G-E-D, okay? So that tends to be the way a lot of people remember it. It's a little mnemonic that people use. I'm just going to spell it out on the screen so you all see it. Okay, so here are the 5 easy major keys to play in right here. So the key of C major, A major, G major, E major, and D major. Now those are out of order. In terms of the order of sharps, that like if you add them back, I'll change it so that we add a sharp each time. Let's see now, where are we? D. And no, I blew that. C, G, no, it's D, A. C, G, D, A, E. Okay, and that's the same letter names, but in the order that they appear if you add 1 sharp at a time. So C has no sharps or flats, G has 1 sharp, D has 2 sharps, A has 3 sharps, and E has 4 sharps. So on the guitar, really what you want to do is you want to master those 5 major keys first. Then there are some what are called relative minor keys that are related to some of these major keys. Okay, so the key of C, instead of starting on C, if you start on A, okay, that was 2 octaves of A minor. It's the same letter names that you find in the key of C, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. If you start on A instead, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay, so the same letter names, but starting on the 6th note of the C scale gives you the relative minor. That's why, you know, the key of C, if you're playing a song, very often people, when they go to the bridge, they'll go to the relative minor because it's ear candy. It sounds great because you haven't done anything. You haven't changed the key at all, really. You've gone to the relative minor key, which is the same key, really. It's just a different home note, and it sounds great. So the easy minors, okay, that are relatives to some of these are, I'll write them out, A minor, A minor, D minor, and E minor. So those are the 3 easiest keys to play in on the guitar that are minor keys. And basically they're just other versions of these. Like A minor is the relative minor of C. D minor is the relative minor. Oh, did I get this right? Yeah, D minor is not so bad. D minor is actually not the best key in the world, but it's an easy chord to play. And then E minor is the relative minor of G. So if you get used to those, then you're well on your way. Now, your big question was, how do you get good at all the keys? Well, the scales, once you learn them in first position, if you learn them with a lot of open strings, like, you can also learn them with fingering each note, like. So even though that's the key of C, I didn't play any open strings. The cool thing about that is once you learn that sequence of fingerings in the key of C with all the strings fingered like that, you can just move it a semitone up, and now you're playing in C sharp, but it's really D flat. Okay, we call it D flat. Move it up a semitone, you get D. Up another semitone, E flat. Etc. Okay, and we can move that to various parts of the neck and using different stringings each time. And so once you learn the patterns in a certain key, you can play them all over the neck. And that comes in handy, like if you're going to solo, let's say, over a song that's in the key of E flat. You're playing along with a piano player who likes to play the tune in E flat. Not the most guitar-friendly key. But, you know, you've learned your bar chords, you've learned how to play in E flat, and you start playing single note lines in E flat because you've learned those scales up and down the fingerboard. So that's a very quick answer to your big question, and there's more to the answer that I could give, but I should get to more of the comments here. Cameron, you say the letters on the screen literally 5-string violin tuning. Exactly. The cool thing about the way all the bowed stringed instruments are tuned in fifths instead of fourths. See, the guitar, the bottom 4 strings on a guitar and the 4 strings of an upright bass or a bass guitar are tuned to even the same letter names, E, A, D, G. The upright bass and the bass guitar are tuned an octave below the guitar. So the bottom string on a bass rather, is this E but an octave lower, okay? And so we get, on a bass, we get E, A, D, G, just like on a guitar. But on a bowed stringed instrument, instead of being a 4th jump between strings, it's a 5th jump. So they would tune, let's say this was their bottom string, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They would tune the next string higher to this note, okay, instead of this one, right? And so that's why, yeah, exactly. You pointed out that when I put the letter names for the 5 easy keys in the guitar, it spells out 5-string violin tuning, open tuning, exactly, because they're tuned in fifths. And I put the keys out in what's called the circle of fifths order. So every time I added a sharp, we go up a 5th, and that's how it works. Anyway, that's all cool theoretical stuff that sounds weird when you first hear it and then makes more and more sense the more you think about it. Yoshihumi Sato, hello, nice to see you here. Louis Tabosa, hi Don, I believe that the guitarist Alex Hutching uses all fourths to better translate the lines in many octaves. Good point. Yes, a lot of jazz players especially, I'm afraid I don't know Alex Hutching or his music, or her music. I'll check it out. Alex could be a boy or a girl. But yes, I've encountered jazz musicians who will tune like this. So those are all fourths, and then they go. Okay, so they tune the second string to a C instead of a B, and then they tune their high string to an F instead of an E. You have to have fairly fresh strings on, you might break, but... And right away that sounds pretty cool, but different from standard tuning. But the nice thing is, like on the Kelstone, you could do something like this. Okay, and then take that exact same set of fingerings. Oh, isn't that nice? Ran out of strings, but on the Kelstone with 9 strings, you can go a long way with that one fingering for your major scale, right? So it really simplifies the fingerboard. The problem is, if you play in certain keys, like if you play in E, for example, E is no longer an easy key to play in this tuning, because you've got the bottom strings making the E chord, but then you've got a C and an F on top, you know? So you got to avoid them. Okay, just like on the Kelstone too, you can use this major chord fingering, and you can move it all over the guitar, all over the instrument, and always get a major chord. Just like that. Same here if I like used it as a bar chord. So it really does simplify the fingerboard. It's just that in terms of real world playing, it takes a lot of adaptation. It kind of means that a lot of repertoire that's normally very guitar friendly becomes not very guitar friendly. But that's the case with any change to the tuning anyway. If you play in an altered tuning or an open tuning, you're not going to be able to play Freight Train right away you know, if you're in C minor 11th tuning or whatever. Yeah, so good point. Thank you for making that, Louis. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. I'm covering my tracks by pronouncing it both ways. Also from Lewis, about that, when you compose with the guitar in hands, do you play with awkward tunings to get some ideas? Or the need of the music asks for those different tunings? Very good question. Excellent question. The answer is usually the second of those. Usually the piece needs something, and that's something I'm not finding in standard tuning or in another tuning that I like to use. So I have to alter the tuning. Sometimes it's only one string. I'll give you an example. For example, many years ago, I was in Mexico, and I had this dream, and we were just down there on holiday with my late wife, and I had this dream one night that incorporated a piece of music in my dream. Now, we weren't staying next to a club that had live music or anything, so this really was a piece of music I dreamed. And when I woke up in the morning, I remembered how it went. It was crazy. So I had a guitar with me, so I just sort of figured out, oh yeah, the first change is A minor, then it kind of went to an F sharp minor, and then to like a G major 7, and then like an E minor, and then a D minor, and then like an A over C sharp, etc. I sort of I remembered well enough to be able to sort of record in my memory with a guitar in my hand the exact changes I played. When I got home, I figured it out on the piano, and I really liked the chord voicings I came up with on the piano. And they were different sounding from the ones I would have gotten if I'd had the guitar in my hand. So that's cool. So I really wrote the piece on the piano. And then I thought, well, I want to play it on the guitar. Okay, certain things worked. Certain things just didn't sound very interesting. So to make a long story short, what I did was I tuned the bottom string, believe it or not, to a C sharp. So there. So that solved all the problems. It made all the bass notes I wanted to get achievable. Plus, there was this one chord I really wanted to get. It was this one. It's an A, an A sus2. Okay, so it's a simple chord to play in standard tuning, but I wanted to get it with a C sharp in the bass. Okay, again, not that bad. Sounds nice, even like that. But I wanted to get the bass note an octave lower, and no, that bottom string, if you're tuned to E, not possible. I tried it tuned to C. It was really awkward. I tried B. I thought, well, none of those notes will work for this piece of music. So tuning it to C sharp, lo and behold, that's the chord I really wanted to hear, right? So it made the whole piece easy to play. Not easy. It's a very difficult piece to play, but now the changes went. There's the chord. That all repeats, and then it changes to a different key. And then down a whole tone. And then back to. And like I said, the piece is harmonically very complex, and transcribing it for guitar ended up being very difficult, and even now I get a very sore left hand when I play it. But it became possible just by tuning the bottom string to a C sharp. So it's standard tuning, but with C sharp. It sounds very weird when you do that. Great. So that's a very good question. New says, when I find a nice melodic interval, what's the best way to find intervals in any tuning? What's the difference between intervals and inversions? Okay, an interval is simply like a musical distance. So an interval could be, for example, get back in standard tuning. When you tune the guitar, most of the time, the interval between the two strings is a fourth. Most of the time, right? There's a fourth. We talked about this a minute ago. That's a fourth. That's a fourth, but this is a third, a major third. Okay, and this is a fourth. So those are examples of fourths and thirds, and that the name, of course, comes from how far apart those two notes would be in a scale, how many scale steps they are apart. Then, your other question is, what's the difference between an interval and an inversion? An inversion is when you take an interval and turn it upside down, basically. That's all you're doing. So I'll take a fairly simple one first. If you do, say, a fourth, in this case, A to D. Okay. So what I did is I started at A. So you count the first note every time. So A, right? A, B, C, D. Okay. So I went from A up to D. So that's a fourth. Okay. And then if I were to start at D instead, okay, A, B, C, D, and I said, okay, instead of going A to D, I want to go D to A. So in other words, I'm going to go up to A. So what I've done then is I've taken the A that's an octave higher than that low one I already played. So A to D, that's a fourth. Now to get from D to A, okay, these two outside notes, we call them both A because they're an octave apart, okay? But in between them I had this D. So when I went from the A to the D, I went up 4 notes. But then if I go from the D up to the next A, 5 notes. So what does that mean? It means that the inversion of a fourth is a fifth. Okay? So with inversions, what we usually say is we follow the rule of 9. What it means is when you invert an interval, the inversion of that interval, okay, the difference between the first inversion size and the second one will be, when you add them up, it equals 9. I'm not explaining it very well. So a fourth, the inversion is a fifth. 4 plus 5 is 9. A third, the inversion is a sixth. 3 plus 6 is 9. The inversion of a second is a seventh. 2 plus 7 is 9. okay? And same with the other way around. The inversion of a seventh is a second, because 7 and 2 equal 9. And so you can hear it, though, like this. Here, we just did fourth and fifth. Okay, so here's a third. C to E, 1, 2, 3, do, re, mi. So 3, that's a third, okay? And then if I, instead of going from the low C to that E, what if I went from the E to the higher C? Okay, so we started with a third. The inversion of a third would be a sixth, okay? Because 3 plus 6 equal 9. So, and you can hear it and sing it. 3 starting there, so make that your new one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Da, ba. So that interval, whoops, excuse me, that inverted interval is a sixth. The smaller version was a third. So that's the difference between an interval and an inversion. They're both, well, even the inverted interval is still an interval, okay? But the inversions, like the name sort of implies, you're flipping the interval upside down. You're reversing it, okay? Cameron, you're saying that the difference between fourths and fifths always confused you. Yeah, well, they sound a lot alike, right? Here's what I usually tell people. Fifths are rock solid. You know, fifths are like the basis of rock and roll. You know? We play a lot of chords that are just 2 notes like that when we're playing rhythm guitar in a rock band, or we might play the 2 notes and the octave. We might just finger it like this. Okay, so fifth is a building block for a chord. You'll find fifths in every chord, basically, every triad, right? So like C major or D minor or F major or F sharp minor seventh, whatever. There's always that fifth building block in there. That's kind of like the foundation of the chord, the thing that we build the chord on top of. And then there's the third note of the scale is what gives the chord its modality, right? So that's the basis of a triad. But that fifth interval, 1, 1, 5, dum, bum, okay? That feels like it's not going anywhere. That's, in fact, a lot of people, especially not trained musicians, if you play them just this, they very often can't tell that you're playing 2 notes. They think you're only playing 1, right? They just hear la, because that higher note that's a fifth away is a very strong harmonic in the octave of the first note, of the lower note, okay? Now, if you turn it around and play a fourth instead, here, I'm going to use a common do here. So here's the fourth, and here, sorry, that was the fifth. Here's the fifth, rock solid. Here's the fourth. Now the fourth is also what's called a consonant interval. Consonant means sounds together, sounds really nice together, okay? The fifth, though, sounds like it ain't going nowhere. The fourth always sounds to me a little unstable, like it wants to resolve to something else. Even though it's consonant, I kind of want some resolution, right? So I either want it to resolve to the fifth or to the third, which is how we use fourths a lot, right? Suspended fourth chords. All those chords. The suspension means that we're taking away the modality from the chord, but we're doing that by taking away 3, taking the third out of the chord, and substituting the fourth. And that fourth interval, it sounds great, consonant, nothing dissonant at all about it. It's just you're waiting for it to resolve, right? You're waiting for it to resolve to something even more stable than the fourth. So if that helps, that's kind of the way I look at fourths and fifths. Yeah, exactly. Cameron, you're saying you play a variety of stringed instruments, and so you understand that the fifths tunings are more familiar. Oh, I see, you play bowed stringed instruments, yeah. Tenor guitar and mandolin both use fifths. Yes, they do. Because the mandolin is essentially the fretted, plucked version of a violin, right? They're kind of the same instrument, played 2 different ways, right? So they all have counterparts between the plucked string family and the bowed string family. So the mandolin has the violin, the mandola has the viola, right? The cello has the mandocello, right? And then there's even bass mandolins, and stuff like that. It's crazy. So, and there are other double course instruments like the Saturn and the Irish bouzouki and things like that that are deep sounding, almost cello-like instruments. So yeah, exactly. The mandolin uses fifth tuning, sure does, and tenor guitar, of course, yes, as well. You tune a tenor guitar kind of like almost like a cello, I guess. I'm not sure exactly what the range is of a tenor guitar, but yeah, same idea. Great. And Yoshihumi, you're watching from Japan. Awesome. I haven't been to Japan since 2017. I'm looking at the poster. It's across the room. My last tour was almost 5 years ago now. Yeah. It was November of 2017. I played all over Honshu Island. I even went down to Amami, down in Kagoshima, so in the south of Japan, in the archipelago there, where it's always nice weather. It's like having a little miniature Hawaiian vacation when you go there. Yeah, I love Japan. I've been 6 times, maybe. Love it. So I hope to get there again soon, now that maybe we're emerging from COVID enough to do that. New is asking if I have exercises which can spark creativity, but your question is basically here to how to be creative as much as possible when it comes to playing someone's composition and composing your own songs. Another big question. Creativity, I think, personally comes mostly from listening. You listen to lots and lots of different kinds of music, and then that will spur you to want to create and want to be a good arranger or a good composer. That's a big answer to a big question, or a very non-specific answer perhaps. But for example, if I'm arranging somebody else's tune, I'm not usually worried too much about playing it exactly like the original. I don't do that many cover tunes. I only do a very small handful, actually. But when I do, I try to bring a lot of myself to it. Like, for example, there's my arrangement of Crazy by Gnarls Barkley, the big hit about 15 years ago. And I play it in the same key. I play it in C minor, which is the original key, and I can do that because I use this tuning that I use for Michael. It's a tuning that goes C, G, C, G, B flat, C. So it's like a C seventh chord with no third, and it fit perfectly with the version of Crazy because the top 3 strings spell out the 3 notes that are in the chorus. So I could play them either as open strings or harmonics, which is actually what I really do. And despite the fact that the tuning itself seems like a bit of a blunt instrument, there's not much, there's really just 1s and 5s and that one flat 7 in it. It actually lends itself to very complex chord voicings, but that are easy to finger. So I was able to use that as a compositional tool. So, I mean, what you're talking about is something that probably means years of listening and playing and really familiarizing yourself with the instrument, and it's not something that comes like that. Now, at the same time, there are certain tunes that lend themselves to more easy arrangement, say in standard tuning, that can be learned quickly, even if you arrange them yourself. Sometimes the tunes are really not hard. Or there are also pieces that were written originally for keyboard. Say, if you look at the work of Johann Sebastian Bach, okay, so he lived 1685 to 1750. I remember it from my music history course. But he wrote a lot of beautiful counter melodies to hymn tunes. So that's very often how he would arrange tunes. So that it was quite brilliant. So he would take a well-established hymn that everybody knew in the community, and then he would add a counter melody. He would write a whole other piece that sort of went underneath it, like this one. That's called Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring in English, or Jesu mein Freud in German. And so at that point, you've heard that much of the piece, and you haven't even heard the original hymn tune yet, right? The hymn tune goes on top of it. It goes, da, da, it's amazing. It's brilliant. It's smart, you know, but and it's also guitar friendly. It's in the key of G. You get to play a lot of open strings. It modulates to A minor at one point. That gets a little tricky, but it's possible to play. Anyway, certain tunes like that lend themselves to guitar arrangement much more clearly and easily because of the single note melodies, the friendly key, G major, only one sharp, all those things. Other tunes need a lot of finessing and finagling and massaging in order to sound great as arrangements. So hope that's a cursory answer to another one of your big questions. Great. Okay, Thatcher Harrison. Hello. Thatcher says your music has a very strong sense of implied percussion, but you don't use body percussion very much at all. How do you create the effective percussion in your music without actually using percussion? That's a great question. Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of all of this that's been happening a lot in the last 15 years. You know, people using their guitar like a bongo drum a lot of the time. It's become a little hackneyed. You know, it's become a little typical, a little bit of a cliche. I was always a fan of using the percussive elements of the guitar without relying on them, right? So what you call implied percussion is maybe when I play like a lot of that, there was some like backslappy stuff like that on the 2, but there are players these days I find who you played on the 2 and the 4, every single 2 and 4 for the entire tune. And I think that's maybe because of, I mean, don't get me wrong, Andy McKee's one of my best friends, but he became such a sensation in the mid-2000s that, and he had a bunch of tunes that kind of had this dun, kind of groove in them. And everybody started doing it, and I guess because everybody was being influenced, or maybe everybody wanted to have a viral video or whatever. When I was a kid, I listened to people like Joni Mitchell, who is an early guitar hero of mine, and she used what my late wife used to call the Joni Mitchell slap, and so that's what I still to this day call it. And again, it was like that kind of thing, but it's kind of free and breezy and not too in your face. It's there, you know, and it creates a backbeat without always having to say it. And sometimes in your playing, you can do things that are heavily syncopated, where in the end, because you've set up a strong groove already, the listener can start inserting the groove themselves. I don't know how else to explain that. Like if I play a little bit of Dracula again, just because it's easy to get the tuning. Originally this piece was written a tone lower than this, but if you put everything a tone higher, it's very close to standard tuning. Now you can hear I did some backbeat, but I didn't always. And if you hear it a couple of times, your brain just starts putting it in there. And then when the melody starts, okay, a little sloppy, but you hear how little actual backbeat playing I was playing there. A lot of it was this, just stopping the notes at a certain point, or stopping them here at a certain way, or playing tunes clipped, playing tunes slightly syncopated, like a 16th ahead of the beat. You know, that's the essence of funk music very often, is playing 16th note pushes like that. And then you don't have to say it every single time. You imply it, and then that way the listener ends up grooving. And very often I find when I'm playing tunes like that, you can see people just keep in time with their bodies, right? And so they know where it is, right? They don't have to hear it every time. It's cool. Now it's different if you're in like a rock band, you know, and the drummer's playing on the 2 and 4 all the time, because there's a lot going on. There's a big sound. You need somebody to keep time and keep it grounded and keep everybody conscious of where 2 and 4 are. But I think if you're playing solo, there's a tendency to overstress it a lot of the time. Anyway, not to diss anybody who uses guitar percussion tastefully. I just think that it got to a point where things were getting a little out of hand there for a few years. Great. Renee, what are my favorite choices of woods for my guitar and why? I don't have huge preferences, although I noticed that there's a difference. For example, this is the most recent guitar that Mark Beneteau built for me. Now, I'll explain. These white dots are stickers because I use this guitar a lot for my online lessons that I give. I decided to put stickers on it. Normally, Mark doesn't use any adornment on his instruments, so that this is really a plain fingerboard. But for teaching's sake, this is a good thing. So this guitar is reminiscent of some other guitars that I've owned in my life. So this one has a cedar top, and it has mahogany back and sides. Okay, so cedar and mahogany has a certain combo effect, right? Cedar is very soft compared to spruce, so it has better mid-range. It's more of a round tone you get out of it, and then the mahogany in the back and sides makes less of a difference than, say, if you were to make it out of rosewood or whatever. If you A-B'd two guitars that are the same model, basically, or the exact same body shape, made by the same manufacturer or the same builder, one had a cedar top, one had a spruce top, and then they had identical back and sides. The thing that you're hearing, the difference between them, the sonic difference that you'd be hearing, is the top. And that's what pretty much every luthier will tell you. You're hearing the top wood. You're not, the back and sides, a lot less important. They need to be reflective. They need to be hardwood as opposed to the softwood that you put on the top. But you have a lot of choice with the back and side wood. So mahogany, certain kinds of mahogany are still plentiful in the world, so it can be made without being too threatening to a lot. And then some rosewood is still being harvested ethically. So if you have a rosewood back and side guitar, like Indian rosewood, you're usually okay. Although I've heard various conflicting reports about how threatened Indian rosewood is. Certainly Brazilian rosewood, don't do that unless it's really old. It was harvested a long time ago. Mahogany is a good choice. I have guitars that are made of cocobolo, which is I believe an African version of rosewood. It's a relative of rosewood. Makes a great guitar. I have a guitar sitting in a stand over there. The guitar that Mark made me in 2017, it's cocobolo on the back and sides and spruce on the top. So a much heavier guitar. Like this guitar weighs nothing because mahogany is very light. The cocobolo is much heavier, and the spruce and cocobolo combination is good for me as a live guitar because it can put up with the punishment more. The top is harder. The back and sides are a little more, sturdy. So this guitar, I'd be a little nervous using it too much live, although I have used it live. I wouldn't punish it too hard. I'm always worried about cedar tops. They're soft. They can be cracked really easily. I'm trying to keep my guitars in better shape than I used to. I also have other guitars that Mark built me that were made out of paduk on the back and sides, which is an African wood. It's very red looking. It's a great guitar wood. So less commonly used, but I like all of those. And I don't think I've never really had a walnut guitar, like walnut back and sides. There's a bunch of different options that people go for that I haven't tried yet. But yeah, everything I've used has either been Indian rosewood on the back and sides, cocobolo, or mahogany, and then either spruce or cedar on the top. Oh, I have a koa guitar as well. I think New Zealand koa. My 7-string guitar is a koa instrument with a spruce top. So there we go. All right, let's see what else people are asking. Favorite choice. What happened to your tune? Made it this far? Oh, you know what? That's a piece I wrote for. Sam is wondering about a tune of mine called "Made It This Far." I like that tune. I may re-record it. I wrote it for a sound library, for a music library, like my tune "As Eddie Leaves the Building," which if you saw the very beginning of the video, the very beginning of the stream, I made a little video as an intro thing, which I'll probably play on the way out as well. A tune of mine called "As Eddie Leaves the Building." That's from the same contract that I had to write music library stuff. Sometimes the music library tunes are meant to be kind of laid back and not too noticeable, like they're going to be used as underscore. But a couple of times they said, oh, let's write something really melodic and tuneful. So that's where As Eddie Leaves the Building comes from, and made it this far. So I may re-record that tune. I would have to change the name because that's part of the stipulation, but we'll see. I've got an EP in mind, so I'm probably going to put it out soon. Neo Red is asking, what do you do to get inspired? What things do you find most inspirational in your life, and how do you come up with ideas to put that inspiration into composition? I find travel very inspiring, being in new places, new landscapes, meeting new people often inspires new tunes. And otherwise, I'm a very introverted, I kind of live in my head kind of guy. So sometimes just my thoughts about life and stuff I've done in my life inspires things. People I've met, great experiences that I've had, sad experiences I've had. All of those things inspire music. So those are definitely the biggest inspirations, probably new places, new people, more than anything else. Sometimes, though, I just have to force myself to be inspired. I'll be looking at a blank keyboard or or a blank guitar and thinking, what am I going to do with you today? Especially if I have to write something, for a contract or for a film score or whatever. And sometimes you're just looking at the instrument saying, I don't know what I'm going to do next. And then sometimes just the fact that that you have a deadline is great inspiration. I've used this line a few times with my group, but people have often asked me how I remember so many hours of repertoire in so many different tunings, and I usually say a mortgage and kids will do it. The kids are grown. I still have to pay for a house, though. Okay. Let me see now. Cameron, I might progress to bowed instruments one day. Baby steps. You play mandolin and tenor guitar. Great. Yeah, I tried to teach myself how to play the fiddle back about 30 years ago, and it was fit to be tied. The notes are way too close together and no frets. Cello, though, I don't find cello very difficult. It's very guitar-like in terms of especially the left-hand stuff. Bowing is hard to get used to. Of course, bowing takes years to get really good at. But, and of course, you bow a violin and like this, and you bow a cello kind of the other way, right? And same with the bass. But I play upright bass. I don't own one anymore, but I have played it in the past. A lot of fun. What's my opinion on Lenny Breau? My opinion on Lenny Breau is that he was effing amazing. On a related note, what areas should I focus on to improvise polyphonically on guitar? That's from just another Guyenne. Lenny Breau was a great guitar player. He could do things that nobody's ever thought of before. In fact, he innovated a lot of effects. Things like the ripple effect, like again, I forgot what tuning I was in. Things like this, where you play a combination of normal notes and fingered notes, or normal notes and open strings, and you can do it with chords, like I can bar across. It's pretty cool. Anyway, Lenny invented that, and not Chet Atkins, not Tommy Emmanuel, not Ted Green. It was Lenny Breau. He taught it to all those guys. So he was great. Your other part of your question was focus on improvising polyphonically on the guitar. Well, to be honest, my improvisations that are polyphonic are very harmony based. So, for example, like if I'm playing single notes, that's one thing, and then polyphonically. So relying on parallel sixths or parallel thirds, maybe. Those all work really nicely. So thirds and sixths inverted equals 9. Very, very, very effective. Now, with other styles, like if I'm improvising a blues, let's say, I'm not a great blues player, but if I were doing like something simple like a blues in A, that was mostly comping, right? And then so what I'm doing there is I'm essentially relying on single notes, parallel sixths, parallel thirds, but also playing bass notes at the same time so that you know which chord change we're on. So that's about as polyphonic as my improvisation usually ever gets, to be honest. Lenny Bro, what he would do, the one album I'm really familiar with him is an album called 5 O'Clock Bells. And he has a real freedom to his playing, but mostly what he's doing, like the essence of what he's doing, is he's playing sort of a combination of comping, like playing chords, and then playing like melodic fragments on top, like. It was sloppy, but I was playing some pretty chords and occasionally throwing in some melodic fragments. And then what he'll often do then is he'll play a chord and then play a single note passage quickly, as if he's doing question and answer. So with the guitar, there are a lot of limitations to what you can do on the instrument and what's possible at the same time. So it is a polyphonic instrument, but it's not like the piano where you can play 12 notes at once and be playing full chords with your left hand and improvising single notes on top. That's you can't quite do that on the guitar. You can get close. You can sort of hint at it, but I hope that helps a little bit. Okay. I'm only going to take a few more because we're getting a little over an hour here. But how does your day look when how to achieve daily goals? How do you set goals that are getting burned out? This is new. What is a healthy way of achieving any goal pertaining to guitar? For me, when I was really young and I had like limitless time to play the guitar and no responsibilities and no bills and all that kind of stuff, basically I just had to go to school and get decent marks and the rest of my time was up to me. I had hours and hours to devote to getting good at the guitar. And so I decided from a young age I was just going to be the best musician I could possibly be, but sort of on my own. I was very self-taught. But, I listened to a lot of music. I experimented a lot. I tried a lot of different instruments, kept coming back to the guitar, really enjoying it. As an adult, I find that because our days are fuller, depending on how your life is structured, how much, how many hours a day your job takes or whatever, then for me, it's time management. It's just like, okay, for the next 3 hours, I'm going to work on this. Then I'm going to do an hour of this. Then I'm going to stretch. Then I'm going to, walk around. I'm going to go for a bike ride. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to do this. I have to be. I don't write it all down, but I tell myself at the beginning of the day, okay, probably from now till noon, I'll do this. Then I have an appointment at 1, so I'll grab a quick bite and go to my appointment. And then at 3, I have to teach a lesson, and then I'll work on my score for an hour, then I'll cook dinner, then I'll write some emails at night. I'm very innerly scheduled, without having to punch a clock. So I hope that helps. Nice to hear that you like that, Maryse. Thanks very much. Merci beaucoup. You like the way I play because it's there on harp guitar. Thank you very much. That's a great tune. I got to practice that again because I love playing that tune. How do you care for your instruments in maritime areas? The key is in anywhere you live, if you go through a dry season, then you need to have a humidifier in your, either have a humidifier in the room where you have your instruments, or have humidifiers in each of your instruments and put the instruments in a case. So here in the maritime area of Canada, we get high humidity most of the year. Like very often the humidity is 60-70%. Right now I have a hygrometer in my studio, and the temperature is just starting to get a bit cooler now. So the highs are only like 16-18 degrees during the day. And right now I've got 47% humidity in my room here in my studio. So the magic sort of span of humidity is usually between like 40 and 50%. That's ideal for a guitar. So 47, I'm right on, no problem. It's finally going down a little bit after being up around 60% for several months because we had a hot summer. And I also have in the corner, I have a machine that's both a heater and a humidifier. So if it gets a little too cool in here, I can turn the heat on. If I look at the hygrometer and it's going below 40%, I also turn the humidifier on. And then that way I can keep my instruments in stands. Usually in a climate where you have a winter, like we get a winter here, it's a better idea to leave your guitars in the case with a humidifier in them during the winter. But if you want to keep them in stands, have a humidifier in the room. Really important. And get a little, my hygrometer cost $2 at the dollar store. So it's coming in very handy. Thanks, Hilda. Good question. Cameron, do I ever play dobro live or is it just for studio work? I used to play it a lot live with my wife, Brooke, when she was doing music full time. Because on her record, I played a lot of dobro and I played a lot of lap steel. So I used to play them a lot then. My solo shows, never, no. And I use it in the studio quite often. Here on Prince Edward Island on Friday, across Canada, we have this new holiday the last few years. It's called Truth and Reconciliation Day, and it's to keep in mind the injustices that have taken place against Indigenous people here in Canada, and to try to work towards reconciliation. So I'm half and half. My father's a Scottish immigrant. My mother was First Nation Canadian, Indigenous Canadian. So I'm sort of saying sorry to myself a lot, but it's a very important holiday. And on Friday here on Prince Edward Island, the local CBC radio station used a piece of mine that I wrote for Reconciliation Day, and I wrote it on the dobro. And it's a very beautiful tune. It's just called Reconcile. Secret hint, if you go to my SoundCloud, so if you go to donrosscomposer.com, that's one of my websites, go there. There's a SoundCloud playlist that comes up, a really long one, and scroll down to a tune called Reconcile, and you'll get to hear it. It's for dobro and orchestra. It sounds great. A couple more quick questions. If you feel inspired by anything, then this is new again, then what do you do to come up with ideas that put those ideas into a composition? How do you do it? And what are the things you think about at the time? Ooh, another big question. If it's something like a beautiful place, very often that'll inspire a really big, wide open kind of sound. Like I wrote a tune in Japan called Tochigi. That's just named after the town where I was. And I used a tuning that goes intentionally. I got into this tuning. Oh no, I'm getting into the wrong tuning, so I'll talk about another landscape. This tune called Thin Air. And starts like that. The tuning has a lot of fourths and fifths in it. It also has a major second in it. So immediately it sounds like a big landscape. And I wrote the piece in the Rocky Mountains. So I was just looking at mountains and going, oh my gosh, this is huge. So I wanted to write a really huge sounding tune. So the tuning and the approach to the piece really helped capture the essence of the look and the feeling there. Ermak, do I write songs or maybe singing? Okay, I have written some songs with lyrics. I put out an all-vocal album a bunch of years ago called Any Color. You can stream it. It's on all the streams. And it's all vocal. So, and I think on my last studio album, which is called A Million Brazilian Civilians, there are several vocal tunes on that. I think they may all be covers on that album. But I have written some songs with lyrics. Yes. Brian Chang from Taiwan, how you doing? How to improve melody composing and how to come up with chord progressions. Melody composing, basically, I tell people, try to be objective. Try to write something and see if you can sing it. If you can sing it, then it's usually melodic. If you're singing it and you're going, it's not very melodic, right? If it follows if it's got good voice leading in the melody, then it's usually a melodic tune. And then if you go back earlier in the stream, if you're watching this, if you didn't come in at the beginning, I do talk about Dracula and Friends instead of how that groove got started. So I should wrap up. I'm just going to take a couple more very quick comments here. Hilda, you're welcome. Cameron, and you're half Scottish yourself, and you feel it's important, no matter what culture you are, to be in touch with your roots and culture. Absolutely. Have I ever tried playing koto? I haven't, Bradley. I haven't. I have never tried to play the koto. But I did play the Chinese version. I think it's called the Cheng, but I'm not sure. I know there's more than one name for it. Depends on which language you speak there. But and so there was one in a restaurant. I was sitting there, and we were allowed to play it. So I tried it out, and it's basically the same instrument with the local version of it. And Bradley, you saw me at the Confed Center. Oh, that's like a year ago. That's fantastic. And everyone's very welcome. Yes, the Ted Green and Lenny, absolutely. Yeah, they're great. Thank you, Louis, excuse me. Oh, it's the French Louis. Okay, great. Thanks, Louis, and great to see everybody. Thanks for being here from all over the world. It's always nice to do these. We'll do them every so often. And once again, don't forget this is what brought this to you here, the Don Ross Guitar Academy. Check it out. There's all kinds of cool lessons on there. And if you feel like being generous, there's my PayPal. All right. See you soon, okay, you guys? And talk soon. Here, I'll play my little video that I made just before the show started. I'll play it for you again. This is my piece called As Eddie Leaves the Building, dedicated to Eddie Van Halen. See you now.